Hello, I'm Tommy Moore, founder of the Bartitsu Lab, and in this particular video we're going to talk about knives. Now, Bartitsu is a martial art of civilian self-defense. It's designed to train you and prepare you for the types of attacks and assaults that you're likely to face when out there in the big scary wide world. And one of the things we see very little of in most Bartitsu today is the use of the knife and defending against the knife. Now, in reality, the source material for Bartitsu is very, very small. We're looking at a small selection of magazine articles. And then we look at things called the antagonistics, and those are other manuals and sources of the time which talk about weapons. But even the ones that do talk about knives, and those are relatively rare, they don't delve too much into how they work, why they work, what you need to do about them. Those that do tend to rely on rather ornate, jiu-jitsu-esque, unpracticable moves that we know as modern martial artists you just cannot and should not try and pull off. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to talk about how I approach knives in the Bartitsu Lab, how we think about them, how we work with them, and how we fold them into our training, and some things that might help you think about your own training and how you apply them too. So the most important thing to think about when you're looking at a knife is that it's the great leveler. Now, you might be Anthony Joshua, you might have been Muhammad Ali in the 70s, you might be John Jones, doesn't really matter. If Terry from the pub, Fat Terry, who plays darts, eats kebabs, farts and shits himself when he sleeps, has got one of these, he is as good, if not better, than John Jones. Now, obviously, that's a large statement to make, and in most self-defense scenarios, someone like a famous combat athlete or someone that comes from a heavy self-defense background will obviously have some distinct advantage in terms of conditioning, fitness, combative mindset, timing, all of these things. But what I want to get across is that with a relatively easy to use implement, such as a knife, the average person becomes instantly much more dangerous than average. They become infinitely more dangerous. So if you imagine, knife in the hands of someone that's really good with a knife, you're fucked. The knife in the hands of someone that doesn't really know things about knives, still hugely, hugely dangerous. Humans don't necessarily need much training to use a knife. It's a very familiar and comfortable implement for a very untrained human. And we've got to remember with knives that they are one of the most common assault implements we have. In the UK, if you're attacked with a weapon, it's going to be with one of these, or some type of club, baton, hammer, crowbar type instrument. We can deal with this with some degree of relative confidence. We can face these without the piss-inducing fear that this brings to the game. Even a relatively short blade will end you relatively quickly. So we need to pay good, solid attention to knives, how they work, why they work. They're a very common tool in assaults, in thefts, in threats, in murder. So therefore we need to be prepared to use them and be prepared to fight against them. So the first step in all of this really is the knowledge and understanding of the types of knives that you might come across. So I'm going to go through a couple of different types of blade, some of their attributes, some of their strengths and their weaknesses, just so you've got that in your mind. So let's start with this one actually. So this is a switchblade, okay? So it's assisted here, it folds up. I can conceal this on my person, you'd have no idea it's there. Pulling on a little trigger, as fast as this, I now have a fully functioning, single sharp-edged, stabbing, cutting tool, which I can do you in with relatively quickly. And there are lots of these flick and folding style knives out there on the market. They're typically round about this length, so most of them are between 2 and 4 inches in length. Most of them you can pull out really speedily. Even if it's a folder, you can fold it really quickly. It's easy to conceal. They typically have a decent point to them and at least one decent cutting edge. And these are very common. This is designed to be an offensive knife, and therefore it will be able to do offensive things. This is a knife for fighting and hurting. And lots of people, ne'er-do-wells, will carry a knife like this. They will carry a folding or a flick knife that has a wickedly sharp blade, a sharp point, and is small and concealable. So you need to be aware of this type of knife. We've then got knives of convenience, or we've got knives of opportunity. So a lot of people also carry utility tools. So this is a screwdriver, but in essence, it's a kind of knife. It's got a sharp edge. I can hold it, I can shank you with it, I can stab you with it. I can't cut you with it very well, but I've got legitimate reason to be holding it sometimes. It's very easy to have in a trouser leg, and I can repeatedly stab and hurt you with this and cause some serious damage. And don't underestimate the number of attacks each year, which are knife attacks, which are actually tool attacks. They are using things like this. If you think about prison environments, you think about secure environments, a lot of people sneak things like this in. These are easy to access, easy to use weapons of opportunity, and you must treat them as deadly as you would with a knife. You then look at things like this. So again, a weapon of utility, different now. This is a Stanley blade, like so. It's a cutting implement. I can stab with it, but it's a small, sharp stab. It's a relatively brittle blade, but again, these were popular in the UK. They're less popular for assaults now, but they are something you bear in mind. These utility knives here, again, they rely on this lever to pull. So their strengths are, you can carry them with a legitimate reason. They typically fall under legal blade lengths. They're wickedly sharp, and you can use them very quickly. Their down point is, obviously, they lack penetrative power. Unless you know where you're cutting, they're more a weapon of shame and pain than fatality. You know, if I stab you in the throat with this, you are done, even though it's just a screwdriver. If I stab you in the throat with this, you might survive. You know, this is more for inflicting injury, pain and shame. But again, something worth thinking about is the use of utility knives like this. Then we look at things like this. So kitchen knives, and kitchen knives come in all shapes and sizes. They're very commonly used in the UK as weapons of assault, especially with younger people that are finding it increasingly hard to purchase the combat knives. You know, when I was younger, I could go to any market anywhere in the UK, buy something like this. I could buy it online, easy to get hold of. They're still relatively easy to get hold of, but increasingly uncommon compared to your bog standard sharp kitchen knife that you can buy or nick from Tesco. And again, this is quite a big, scary one. I have this big, scary one in my kitchen in case I need to be big and scary. But again, it's a good chopping knife. But again, kitchen knives come in all shapes and sizes. This is a pretty good quality one. So you see the metal runs all the way down. It's sturdy. You know, I would, in full confidence, feel able to use this. Many of the ones that you'll see in street assaults today, they're of the flimsier variety. If you imagine the cheap knives that you buy from IKEA, you know, they might be plastic handle, small tang, but they'll still be pointed, so their thrust ability will still be pretty damn good. Their ability to cut of a cheaper knife, it's not as good. They will cut relatively poorly, and most people won't sharpen that knife, but it will still cut you. But you need to be aware of these kitchen style knives. They're an increasingly common and used weapon of choice. Then you start to move into the scarier realm of things. And if any of you watched a police video of a knife amnesty, you'll see lots of big fuck off scary knives. You know, this is a cookery style knife, like a kind of faux utility knife here. You know, often what you see is like fantasy blades as well. So kind of odd shaped fantasy Rambo knives. I think the trend previously was to call them zombie knives, but big, horrible, oddly shaped chopping and stabbing implements. Again, these are normally pretty sharp, pretty well pointed, will cause you some serious harm, and they're used as a status weapon. You know, you carry one of these because it looks cool. But again, this can be wickedly, wickedly deadly in the hands of a very untrained person. All of these weapons can be wickedly, wickedly deadly in the hands of an untrained person. It doesn't matter how well trained you are, these represent, in the streets of the UK, outside of guns, maximum risk. And if we're looking at Bartitsu as a relevant self-defense art, you need to be ready for the maximum risk scenario. And for me, that is knives and that is multiples. So in the Bartitsu Lab, I spent a lot of time looking at knives and gang attacks, as I see these as two very likely, very foreseeable events. A one-on-one fight, even a relatively untrained person will likely survive or do okay in a one-on-one fight. Multiples and knives is a different story. So to recap, we've got the knives of design. So these are knives designed for combat, causing pain, causing damage. We've got knives of opportunity or tool knives. So here, this is a screwdriver, easy to use as a shank. You've got these utility numbers here, small and sharp, but can still be deadly in the right hands. Your kitchen variety, and they can come in lots of different ways, but typically they are poorer quality, opportunistic knives, but they can still cause serious damage. Then you've got these into kind of an other/novelty category. So larger, chunkier, you can cause some serious damage with a knife like this. But increasingly common in different gangs are big fuck-off machete scary knives. So again, if you're looking at planned attacks, planned assaults, things that people keep in cars. So on their person, you know, something like this down a trouser leg, something like this in a pocket, something like this in a tool belt, very common. In a car, a lot of people will have something, this is a stylized Filipino version, but larger, heavier machetes can cause you some serious mischief. So those are some of the knife types that you need to be aware of. Now, you also need to think of the most common attacks with all of these knives. Each knife has its own attribute. You know, you'll use a Stanley blade differently from a large kitchen knife. But I just want to give you an insight into the most common types of attack, because you've got to be aware of the most likely thing to happen to you for you and your group to be able to prepare for that. So I'm going to use this as just a basic default knife model. Now, your typical attacks come in thus. You get an unattached slash. So an unattached slash is where I have no hold of you, no grasp of you, and typically I will do a forehand and a backhand diagonal cut. So the most common caveman cut, forehand cut, backhand cut. People that are relatively trained can do things like verticals and horizontals, but most of the time, most humans, if they pick up a knife and they have to fight with it, will do a forehand cut and a backhand cut. So you need to be ready for those two major blows, unattached in that instance. You've then got the attached stab. So the attached stab is grabbing clothing, grabbing hair, grabbing your head, and these are short, typically upward stabs to the torso. So holding your head down, up into the torso, holding a jacket, into the torso. People seldom attack to the face unless it's an attack of shame or maiming. You know, if people are trying to do you in, it's typically a torso area, your stomach, your chest, that kind of place. So you've got your unattached forehand, backhand, you've got your attached stab, and very rarely you have an unattached stab, a longer lunging stab. They're relatively infrequent. Most of the things you need to be ready for are 1, 2, grab and stab. 1, 2, grab and stab. So in that knowledge, you know, you do have lots of variants as well, and some people will attack like this, but this is a lot rarer than a four-handed use of the knife. You know, so do train for this, but bear in mind, if I had £1 to spend on training, I would spend 80 pence of it learning to defend against holds like this and 20 like this, okay? So you've got unattached forehand, unattached backhand, attached stab, and unattached stab. These are the types of attacks that you need to get your group really familiar with. Get them doing those techniques and get them defending against those techniques. Those are the high value knife attacks. Obviously you've got knife stand-ups and knife mugging, people using the knife as a point of threat, which is topic for another video, but knife as a actively assaulting weapon, then forehand, backhand, attached stab and detached stab are things that you should really focus on. Okay. And then we look at the principles of defense. And at the Bartitsu Lab, we've got 3 core principles of knife defense and what you need to be and do to defend against a knife. So principle number 1 is to equalize. If you've got a knife, like I said, John Jones is fucking phenomenal. But Terry from the pub holding this represents a massive distinct threat from John Jones without having to train once in his life. So again, you need to be ready. So getting an equalizer is very important. I've got videos elsewhere on the Bartitsu Lab about improvised weapons. Obviously, you've got weapons that you might carry, depending on where you are in the world. That might be legal or it might be illegal. You might choose to ignore the legality and carry it by choice. That's completely up to you. I don't judge. So you've got those weapons. If you've got a weapon, fine, use that weapon. If you don't have a weapon, you need to equalize with something else. So, for example, you know, make sure you watch that improvised weapons video. You might have a pen. Now this is a combat pen here, so it's got kind of a pointed end here. It's a bit more ruggedized, you know, and I can really cause some pretty serious damage with this. It's not scary as a pen. And bear in mind that knives are very scary. Pens aren't very scary. I can cause damage with this, but in terms of fear, adrenal fear, the knife triggers that really well. But again, I might choose to equalize by having a pen like so. I might have a tool, depending on how I work. I might have a wrench, I might have a crowbar, I might have a belt, I might have a table, I might have a chair, I might have any number of things. So do make sure you check out that video. But learning how to use and acquire improvised weapons is really key. So knowing to look for them is one thing in the equalization matrix. Knowing the archetypes of them, so this is a small blunt instrument. Whatever this is a small blunt instrument. If I can use a truncheon, I can use a wrench. In the same way that if I can use a knife, then I can use a fork, I can use a spoon, I can use things that carry similar archetypal merits of that particular weapon. So finding an equalizer is key, and I'd say get used to using weapons that you would likely have as an equalizer. Then we move on to the notion of surprise. Now obviously we don't want prolonged engagements with something like this. You don't want to fight someone with a knife. I might want to defeat someone with a knife, I might want to get myself to a position where I can get away, but I don't want to fight him. So again, getting used to using verbal methods. So being able to use your fence, so that is using talking hands, use distraction, buy time, use trickery, point at things, call the police, start to cry, ask questions, disrupt people. In Japanese jiu-jitsu we call this kazushi. Kazushi is not always physical, sometimes it is psychological. So again, disrupt, confuse, and once we've got that disruption and confusion, do I know your mum? Punch you in the throat. That might be what I need to survive the knife encounter. I might need to use elements of surprise, okay? So get used to kazushi, distraction, buying time, taking up their mental energy, and then surprising. And again, these are cumulative. I might get myself an equalizer, then surprise you, and then attack you. So again, making sure you make use of surprise, because surprise puts you back on the initiative. If you're always responding, you see the knife, there's no point you always just responding to that knife. Sometimes you need to be proactive, you need to change the dialogue over. And that's where using surprise, using your verbal skills, using your de-escalation skills, or indeed your deterrence, because I can de-escalate, I can talk you down. I might, if I judge the instance, talk it up. I might judge that that knife is for show, and I might amp up my deterrence, my level of putting fear into you. So again, something to consider. So we've got equalize, we've got surprise, and finally we've got devastate. Now by devastate I mean you can't waste the time, and you shouldn't waste time in any degree of fighting, but you can't waste the time hitting things that aren't deadly, destructive and advantageous to you as an unarmed combatant. So, as we talk about Bartitsu, we talk about things like boxing, and we talk about savat, and we talk about jiu-jitsu, and we talk about cane. But the most important thing is where we are hitting people and what with. So it's all well and good us training in the academic boxing of the time, but we need to get used to punching people in the throat. We need to get used to the notion of putting thumbs into eyes. We need to get used to the notion of being able to kick people in the bollocks. We need to get used to the things that cause maximum pain, which is important, and injury, which is more important. I can hurt you and run away if it distracts you enough. I might need to injure or indeed end you. So therefore you need to get used to the techniques which are final, which are deadly, which are devastating. And you've seen in other videos me talking about being able to hit really hard. So that's important. You need to learn how to hit really hard. Against a knife like this, I might only get one shot to punch you. So I need to make sure that punch is a bloody good one. And not only that, it needs to be bloody accurate. It needs to get you in a place, I hear, that will cause you to stop trying to stab me. So again, really important factors is being able to fire devastating shots. And that is equal parts power, equal parts accuracy, speed and surprise. So again, in the Bartitsu Lab, there's lots of different tools and ways in which we train knife defense and knife threats. But I'd say the most important first steps, learn about the different types of knives, carry them, get used to them, play with them, get used to their attributes. Once you've got that, then look into the most common types of attacks. As I said, forehand, backhand, attached stab and detached stab. You've got a small curriculum to work from that's very relevant, and then work on your own principles of defense. And that may be differ depending on your instructors, your arts, your preferences. But in the Bartitsu Lab, it's all about being able to equalize, surprise, and devastate. So I hope you found that useful. I hope you never need to use any of this stuff. Always, if you can, run first, and sometimes you can't, so be ready for the situations where you can't. If you've got any questions, you would like to explore anything about this theme further, just let me know. Thank you very much.